I swore I wouldn't speak of it again. I tried to move on, tried to convince myself it was all just a series of strange coincidences. But there are nights. There are nights when I wake up with the feeling that someone has broken into the car, even with the room locked, even with the world silent. The memory of that specific smell, a mix of rain and wet leather, still makes me break out in a cold sweat. My chest tightens, as if I'm back there again, hands on the wheel, hoping the race will be. Soon. It wasn't a common fear. It was something more dense, a kind of emptiness that filled the back seat before anyone got in. And the silence, the damned silence of that presence, made me feel like every ride was a test, like something was waiting for me to break. And I almost broke it. I can no longer hear the sound of a running app notification without feeling a chill run down my spine. Because now I know it wasn't just work. I took that thing, day after day, and I took it like I was just another passenger. But it wasn't like that. I remember exactly the first time it appeared. The city was wet, it had just rained. It was a Tuesday, dawn. I was tired, driving for hours, and then that call. Same place, same name, same destination. At the time, nothing seemed wrong. But looking back now, everything was off from the start. I've been a rideshare driver for 4 years. And yes, I know it doesn't seem like much, but if you experienced the things I experienced in the early hours of the morning in this city, you'd understand why today I hesitate before picking up my phone and activating online mode. It seems like a simple job. Drive, pick up passengers, drop them off, and earn some money. And at first, that was it. But dawn changes everything. The city becomes different. People's faces change. Time passes more slowly. And there are things that only appear when most people have already gone to sleep. I chose dawn because, in a twisted way, I thought it was quieter. Less traffic, less honking, and less heat. And of course, fewer people constantly asking me if I have change for 50 or if I can smoke in the car. But the truth is, I also chose this shift because I didn't have anyone to share the day with. After my ex left with our daughter, I completely lost the normal rhythm of things. I slept whenever I could, ate anything off the street, and spent more time in my car than anywhere else. And the car, little by little, became my home. Literally. The smell of the upholstery mingled with the smell of the coffee I'd left in a thermos out front. That old, bitter coffee I'd gotten at a 24-hour coffee shop on the main drag. It was bad, but warm, and warmth in the early morning has its value. I drove with the radio on low, more to break the silence than for pleasure. Usually a news station that simply repeated the same headlines. Robbery in downtown, heavy rains coming, man found dead in plaza, that sort of thing. Sometimes I'd turn everything off, and all I could hear was the sound of tires on the wet road. The streets at night have a personality of their own. They're not the same as those you see during the day. Some avenues gain a greenish light thanks to old-fashioned streetlights. Others remain completely dark, interrupted only by car headlights. And then there are those industrial areas where everything seems abandoned, but you swear you've seen someone moving in the shadows. I used to run more in the south side. Fewer runs, but longer runs. People returning from bars, nurses getting off shift, drunk guys trying to remember where they live. Every passenger had a story, some funny, some sad, and some I simply tried to forget the next minute. But none compare to that one. Not yet. I haven't gotten there yet. That's another part. Let me explain what my mornings were like. I usually started around 9 p.m. I took my time and waited for the first orders. The first few runs were always normal. Couples going to the movies, people leaving the mall, teenagers returning from a party. I took the opportunity to fill up the tank, wipe down the dashboard with a cloth, and tidy the back seat. Not because I was a coward, but because, I don't know, there was something comforting about keeping the car in order, like it was the only thing in my life I could still control. It was after midnight when the weather changed, literally. The air became more humid, thicker, and the streets were emptying. It was at that moment that I felt most alone. Sometimes I looked in the rearview mirror and saw only darkness behind me, with the red light on the fuel gauge blinking slowly. That always gave me a strange feeling, like I was being watched, but I never took it seriously. Just tiredness, I thought. I grew accustomed to the same places, the same routes. There are streets I know where the sidewalk is higher, where there are holes, where cats cross out of nowhere. It's as if I'd mapped the city in my own way. And within all this, solitude became routine, a comfortable routine, predictable, until it wasn't. There was one night, for example, when I drove a guy in a suit from downtown to a remote neighborhood. He didn't say a word, just walked in, wrote down the destination, and stared out the window the whole way. When I dropped him off at the door of the building, he stepped out, took 3 steps, and disappeared. I swear, he disappeared into the fog. I blinked, and he wasn't there anymore. But I didn't even pay attention to him. I just thought maybe he'd taken a side street I hadn't seen, and I kept going. There's a lot of that going on in the early morning. Something you can't explain, but you also don't want to overthink it. Because if you overthink it, you get stuck. And I needed to keep rolling. I earned enough to live on. There was no surplus or shortage. I've slept in the car more than once, with my head against the window and my shirt rolled up as a pillow. It's not comfortable, but sometimes that's what you get. I'm not complaining, there are worse people. At least I still had my car, my route, my early morning. But over time I began to notice that he was calmer. He no longer spoke to anyone except the passengers, and only when they started a conversation. My friends disappeared. My daughter, well, that part still hurts too much to explain now. I'm just saying there are holes we learn to jump through. You can't fill them. You can't heal them. Just turn around and keep driving. Sometimes I went for a run through elegant neighborhoods. The streets were smooth, the streetlights tall, the houses filled with light. And yet, I felt more observed there than in the poorer neighborhoods, as if every window could hide a secret. I know it sounds like a trip, but there are things we feel even without seeing them. The city hides things, and whoever passes by at dawn begins to hear the whispers. I remember well the feel of the steering wheel in my hands. The leather was a little worn, and there was a slight creaking noise when making sharp turns. The air conditioning temperature fluctuated between freezing cold and uncomfortably hot. It was like an extension of my body, that car. It knew my silences, and somehow I hid inside it. I had a ritual before every shift. I would stop at the cafe on the corner of Ava Andrade and Julio Costa, buy a terrible but strong coffee, and lean on the hood watching the cars go by. It was my night prayer. Sometimes the cashier, Cynthia, would give me a free piece of cake. She said it was because I looked tired. She smiled in a way that mixed pity and sympathy. I never asked anything about her. She doesn't know anything about me either, and that was fine. And it's in this kind of routine, so simple, so automatic, that the strangest things happen, because it's when you least expect it that something breaks the cycle. A presence enters the car, and without saying anything, begins to dismantle your reality, little by little. But that will be later. Now the only thing you need to understand is that I was there, living through these nights, driving through almost dead streets, trying to maintain some dignity amidst the silence, the smell of cold cigarettes left by passengers, the music that came and went on the radio as if hesitant to fill the void. And even without knowing it, even without imagining it, they were already watching me. Have you ever heard of places that remind you of yourself, even when you try to forget them? That's right. There are races that don't disappear from the system. There are passengers who keep showing up, even after they're dead. Have you ever had the feeling that something is wrong, but you can't explain what? As if the world around them remained the same, but something, invisible, silent, had changed places. What I experienced that morning still haunts me. And the strangest thing, I wasn't alone in the car, or maybe I was the whole time. Before we continue, let's take a deep breath, because what comes next is darker than it seems. Like the video now and follow the channel. There are stories that can only be told in the dark. That night, something was wrong in the air. It wasn't the kind of feeling that screams, that compels you to run or react. It was the opposite. It was a silent, dense presence, as if dawn itself were waiting for something. And as much as I tried to stay focused on the wheel, I felt, even before the notification sounded, that this race wasn't going to be like the others. It was raining lightly, the kind of rain that doesn't actually get you wet, but turns everything into shadow. The street lights were blurry, and the reflections on the asphalt created slow-moving ghosts. I pulled over to the side of a side street, waiting for the next call. I nearly fell asleep, my fingers drumming on the steering wheel and the radio whispering an old traffic announcement. And then it vibrated. It was close, almost around the corner. I drove for 2 blocks, taking my time. The city was empty. so quiet that the sound of the windshield wipers seemed too loud. I turned right, and there it was, standing under an awning, in a place I already knew well. A tall, thin man, wearing a white shirt and dark pants. He stood motionless, arms at his sides and head slightly bowed. He looked as if someone had been waiting too long. I slowed down without thinking, signaled, and stopped. When I turned off my hazard, "Lights," he looked up, and I swear at that moment I had the impression he didn't see me. He looked in my direction, but it was as if his gaze passed through the glass, the panel, my skin. It was as if he were looking at something very far away, behind me, or inside. He opened the back door and got in without a word. No good night, no questions. He typed the destination into his phone and showed me the screen. A building in Jardim Clara, a remote region, a road that was almost always empty at that hour. I nodded in confirmation and started the car. In the back seat he didn't move. I discreetly glanced in the rearview mirror and saw only his silhouette, motionless, his face turned slightly toward the window. His shirt was damp, perhaps from the rain, but there wasn't a drop of water on the seat where he was sitting, and that didn't catch my attention at the time. Only later, a long time later. On the way, I tried to break the ice. I always do this when the silence gets too long. He said something like, "It's cold today, isn't it?" and waited for a response. He didn't react, he didn't even move. Nothing. I thought maybe he was wearing headphones. I quickly checked myself in the mirror, and there were nothing in his ears. Just that fixed stare. Lost somewhere I couldn't reach, I kept driving. At every turn, the silence grew heavier. The rain seemed to whisper on the glass as if it wanted to get in. The radio began to hiss, and a strange interference took over for a few seconds, as if someone were trying to tune in to a station that no longer existed. I tried to adjust it, but the sound returned on its own, as if telling me to let it go. That's when I started to feel a slight headache. It wasn't exactly physical. It was more of a pressure, a discomfort behind my eyes, as if my body was reacting to something my mind hadn't yet grasped. My stomach churned. I remember running my hand over my forehead, more out of reflex than necessity. I was sweating cold, despite the air conditioning. And for some reason I don't understand to this day, I thought of my dad. I don't know why. He died almost a decade ago and never used an app. But the memory of him came back to me, driving at night, telling me to always trust my instincts, that sometimes the body feels what the mind can't explain. At that moment, I laughed nervously. "It's too late for instinct now, Dad," I mumbled. I turned left and entered the avenue leading to my destination. It was a wide road, surrounded by vacant lots on one side and high walls on the other. The lighting was poor. Streetlights were interspersed, some off and others flickering, the kind of street where time seems to pass more slowly. It was at that point in the journey that I noticed something that until then seemed like a minor detail. I didn't feel his weight in the car. It's hard to explain. We get used to the rocking, the way the car responds when someone gets in, the sound of the seatbelt pulling. But at that moment, I felt like I was driving alone. I looked in the rearview mirror again. There he was, owned. His face was half blurred by the flashing streetlight, but the bench seemed too smooth, as if no one had actually been sitting there. I swallowed hard. I forced myself to look ahead. I couldn't get distracted. Not in that place. The GPS announced 2 minutes until our destination. I accelerated slightly, wanting to get this over with as quickly as possible. I was already convinced. The guy was just weird and antisocial. Maybe he was returning from a wake. Who knows? Dawn brings all kinds of pain. As I turned onto the street in front of the building, he made the first move. He raised his hand, slowly, very slowly, pointing straight ahead. Without saying anything, without looking at me, I just pointed. "It's there," he said. The voice was low but firm, dry, emotionless. It sounded like a warning, not information. I parked. The building was old, with a black iron gate and a peeling facade. There was a single light on in the entrance, the kind of place where the sunrise weighs more than it should. I opened the doors. I waited for him to leave. Nothing. I waited longer. The back seat was empty. My throat went dry. I turned slowly, my heart racing, hoping to see something, anything to justify the absurd feeling that he was gone. But there was no one. No open doors, no sound of footsteps. Nothing. The car was silent. Full. I checked the app. Race completed. Passenger. Disembarked. Appointment scheduled. Everything normal. Except I knew, felt, this wasn't normal. There was no way it could be, but I still didn't know what to think. And the worst part was accepting that at that moment, all I wanted was to forget. I moved on to the next race, convincing myself that he left too quickly and I didn't notice. Maybe I had gone straight to the door. Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to believe it, because thinking of any other explanation was more than I was prepared to handle. I didn't know that would be just the first time it would appear, but that's another part. The next day I hardly left the house. I spent the whole day with that bad feeling stuck in my stomach. It wasn't fear, at least, not at first. It was more like a constant discomfort, an invisible needle pricking at my insides as if something had been left unresolved. I mentally replayed the previous night about 10 times. The boy, the silence, the destination, the empty bench. I convinced myself, or tried to, that he had gone quickly, that he was tired, that my head had created that. After all, it was just another race. Strange people appear all the time, but at 11:07 a.m., exactly 10 minutes before last night's race, my cell phone vibrated. Same sound, same app, close race, boarding location, that location, under the faded awning. Same name as the day before, common name, nothing suspicious, but the blood drained from my face instantly. I stared at the screen as if I were watching a hazard warning, and yet I accepted. I don't know why I did it. Interest. It was almost automatic. My hand clicked accept before my brain could say no. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was just stubbornness. Or maybe I just didn't want to admit I was afraid. The drive to the point was quiet, more so than usual. I didn't even turn on the radio. The headlights pierced the fog that was beginning to form. It was an eerily similar dawn to the previous one. Same temperature, same light drizzle, same overcast sky. I even checked the dashboard to see if it was a GPS repeat. When I turned the corner, there it was. Same place, same thin body, same side-combed hair, crisp white shirt, dark pants, motionless, as if frozen in time. Again, the arm at his side, and the head slightly lowered. And although everything looked exactly the same, there was something even more wrong. A repeat is never identical. There's always a tiny error, a noise. And this second time, the error was the look. This time, when he raised his face, he looked at me directly, without hesitation, without crossing his gaze, without looking behind me like last time. It was as if he knew I was coming, as if he had been waiting for me. He got into the car the same way, silently. The destination was displayed on the screen, the same old building in Jardim Clara, only now. He looked me in the eye for a second longer before settling into the back seat. I drove without saying anything. The tension was almost physical. Each red light seemed to take forever to turn green. The car was hot, stifling, and the air conditioning didn't seem up to the task. Sweat trickled down my back, even without any effort. And the worst part, I knew what to expect. But still, it didn't make sense. He didn't say anything the whole way. He didn't even move. I didn't even breathe loudly. Sometimes I had to check if he was still there, not out of curiosity, but out of fear that he wasn't. It's weird to wish someone weird was still there, but it's worse when you start to feel like maybe he was never there in the first place. We reached the street outside the building. I slowed down, waiting for a sign, a gesture, anything. He raised his hand again, slowly. It's there. Same voice, same tone, same line, as if rehearsed or relived. I parked in the same spot, the same flickering streetlight, the same old door. I took a deep breath. I waited. This time, I turned around to look. Slowly. The bench was empty, just like last time. I didn't hear the door open. I didn't hear any footsteps. The car fell silent. My heart was beating like a drum in my chest, and my eyes were wide, staring into the back seat, trying to find some logic in this scenario. Nothing, despite everything, and absolutely wrong. This time I couldn't rationalize it. I couldn't find any excuse. This wasn't normal. It wasn't tiredness. It wasn't a distraction. It was something that kept happening. But why? Unease took over. I got out of the car and looked around. The street was empty. No cars, no people, no sound. Not even a wind was blowing. It was as if the whole world had stopped to watch it happen again. I took out my phone and opened the race history. The race was there. Finished. Same time as the night before. Same value. All recorded. Except for the passenger. There was still a slight trace of moisture on the back seat, as if someone had sat there a few seconds before. But when I touched the fabric, it was dry, cold, as if no one had touched it in a long time. I returned to the car, locked the doors and stood there, interrupted, breathing rapidly, trying to understand, trying to find some logical explanation. But logic abandoned me at that moment. There was no way to explain it. The repetition was too exact, too perfect, and that's what made it worse. This time I went straight home. I didn't run any more that night. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't turn on the radio. I sat on the couch and stared into space. Thought. Because deep down a part of me already knew it. I knew it wasn't going to stop there. And it was in that early morning that a question began to eat away at me inside, day after day. Why me? On the third night, I was about to give up on the race. My phone vibrated simultaneously. 23 and 17. Same name, same place. And this time, my finger hesitated on the accept button. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, my heart beating too loudly for the silence in the cabin. I thought about turning off the car and leaving. Forget about everything, sleep. Imagine if none of that had happened, but I accepted. Again. Not out of courage, because I no longer had any, but out of a kind of compulsion. It was as if something outside of me decided I needed to be there, as if this story wasn't mine but rather meant to be told. The route to the point seemed like a repeat, but the weather was different. There was a fog thicker than on other days. The light from the streetlights cut through the air like opaque spears, barely illuminating the street. And the silence. The silence seemed heavier. Even the usual sounds of the early morning hours, a distant engine, the wind blowing against a tree, a dog barking in the distance, had disappeared. The city seemed to hold its breath. When I turned the corner, there it was. Again. But there was something new in his posture. He stood up straighter, as if he knew I was coming, as if he were waiting for me not just patiently but expectantly. He got into the car the same way, without speaking, unhurriedly, always sitting in the same place. And this time, before he showed me the destination, which I already knew what it was, I tried to speak. I couldn't stand this silent, disturbing cycle any longer. "Good night," I said, forcing a casual tone. "Third night in a row, huh?" He remained silent for a few seconds that seemed longer than they should have been. Then, without moving his head, always looking straight ahead, he replied in a dry, low voice as if speaking to himself. "Today, is it still Tuesday?" I froze. It was Thursday. "No, it's already Thursday," I corrected, trying to sound natural. "Tuesday is over." He frowned slightly, as if he didn't understand, or as if he was hearing it for the first time. He whispered, "But the rain, the light, it's all the same. The same." I turned slightly on the bench, still staring at the street. The traffic light was flashing yellow, like a warning I didn't want to decipher. "It's been raining almost every day," I tried to explain, even though I knew it wasn't because of him, but because of me. "It's the season, right? Late fall." He mumbled something else, but I didn't understand. I had to ask, "That?" "The post," he said, still looking out the window. "The street light always flickers the same way, the same sound, the same time, the same shadow." I didn't know what to say. My stomach turned. I tried to change the subject, still trying to rationalize. "Do I work around here?" He didn't respond. He simply leaned his forehead against the glass. After a few seconds, he murmured, "Sometimes I wake up before the accident." My whole body froze. I didn't understand, or didn't want to understand. "Like this?" I asked more calmly. He slowly turned his face toward me. For the first time, he looked directly at me with eyes that seemed empty, not sad, not scared, empty, like a television that's not on air. He said, "When I wake up early, I'm caught in the rain. When I wake up later, it's already too late." I felt a pang in my chest, not from fear, from something worse. Feeling. Before what? "What are you talking about?" He simply looked back out the window. Silence, as if he'd said too much, or as if nothing more could be said. The tension inside the car was almost physical. I was breathing shallowly. My hands on the steering wheel were sweaty and slipping slightly, and even with the air conditioning on, the cabin felt stifling, as if the air were trapped there with me, both of us or whatever. A few more minutes of travel, the same street, the same potholes in the sidewalk, the same unheard footsteps at the end of the race, and then he said, in a whisper, "Do you remember the tape?" I stood still. That? The tape. The glove compartment tape. The one that was left there. My throat went dry. I looked in the glove compartment. Locked. I didn't remember any tape, at least, not yet. But he spoke as if he were certain, like someone who'd already experienced it, as if someone were waiting for me there every night. And at that moment I realized that what I was saying didn't make sense because it wasn't supposed to be done. It was as if I were out of place, talking about memories I didn't have yet, or memories that weren't mine, loose phrases, fragments of a story I insisted on repeating, trying to stick in the right place, never quite succeeding. Upon reaching his destination, he didn't point this time. He just said, "Sometimes. I think I've seen you before, but you always pretend I haven't." My heart raced. I stopped the car. I looked back. He wasn't there anymore. Just the empty bench. Again. But in the rearview mirror, for a millisecond, I swear I saw the reflection of a face, standing on the sidewalk, staring back at me. And for the first time I was sure of one thing. I was also trying to understand what was going on, but maybe he had been in prison longer than me. Do you think he might be trying to warn me about something? By the fourth night I was no longer trying to pretend it was a coincidence. There was no longer any room for doubt, not even fear. What gripped me now was something else, a strange urgency, as if I were about to discover something I shouldn't have, but it was too late to back out. I accepted the race without hesitation. Same place, same time, same name. But this time he wasn't the only one waiting for me. I was waiting for it too. Time seemed to slow down as I approached the usual spot. It was as if the city curved around that man, bending logic to accommodate his existence. There he stood under the dirty awning, his white shirt now a little more wrinkled, with a dark stain on the sleeve, like dried wine or old blood. The face, expressionless, and the eyes, those eyes, found me just as I stopped. A look that didn't say good night or thank you or I'm ready to go, but something like, "You know what you have to do." He got in as usual. Absolute silence. But this time, something different happened. As he settled into the back seat, something fell out of his pocket. A badge. It hit the carpet with a dull, worn plastic sound. I saw it in the rearview mirror but didn't comment. I waited until we were a few blocks away, then stopped at a red light and discreetly picked up the object. It was an old laminated badge, its edges peeling. In the center, her photo, undoubtedly. The same face, the same dead stare. And below, the name, the same as the one on the application, followed by the title, IT Technician, Municipal Health Building. Up until that moment it was already strange. But what stopped me in my tracks was the date, 2014. It was like a punch in the gut. The badge had expired more than 10 years ago. I tried to look back, but his eyes were already closed, as if he was sleeping, or pretending, or waiting. I pretended I didn't notice. I discreetly stowed the badge in the dashboard storage compartment and drove the rest of the way, trying to control my breathing, my sweating, and the urge to just stop the car and flee. But I needed to understand, I needed to know who or what that man was. That night, after I dropped him off, or thought I did, I went straight home. I opened my notebook as if my life depended on it, and at that moment I no longer doubted it. I wrote his name. At first, nothing important. 1 or 2 deactivated social media profiles and a few old resumes. But then, I found him. A link to a 2014 news story on a local website. Small headline, almost without any prominence. A public official was found dead in an abandoned building after being missing for 2 days. I opened the article. The face was his, the photo of the badge, an exact copy of what had fallen on my car. The article stated that his co-workers had reported him missing. He was found in an isolated room where no one else passed. His body was in an advanced state of decomposition, despite the fact that he had only been missing for 2 days. The cause of death was undetermined. There were no signs of violence. There was no record of him entering or leaving the building at the time he would have entered. And one more thing. The estimated time of death was exactly 11:17 p.m. I closed the notebook with trembling hands. His head throbbed. It didn't make sense, but at the same time he did it all. The schedule, the repetition, the meaningless phrases, the loop. I wasn't simply reliving a routine. I was trapped in it. And somehow, now, so was I. The next night I didn't wait for the app to vibrate. I left early. I drove to the stop alone, ahead of time. I stood there as if waiting for a ghost, and I think that's exactly what it was. Time passed slowly, almost stopping. The fog fell thicker than ever, and when the clock on the dashboard hit 11:17 p.m., the app vibrated. Race automatically accepted. I didn't need to look around. I knew he was there. He got in the car like always, but this time, I couldn't stop myself. "Why do you keep coming back?" I blurted out, still staring at the rearview mirror. "You know you're not here anymore, right?" He didn't answer. He stared straight ahead, and then he murmured, almost like a lost child, "I can't remember what comes next." My chest tightened. I breathed deeply, pressing the accelerator harder, aimlessly. I wasn't following the GPS anymore. I didn't want to take it anywhere. I wanted answers. I turned the car onto a deserted street, a forgotten road on the edge of the industrial district. Everything there was shadow, everything echoed. I stopped the car in the middle of the street, the engine running. The silence was so absolute I could hear my heartbeat. I turned toward him, slowly, facing everything at once. But the bench was empty, not like before, not just without him, really empty. There was no weight mark, not even a wrinkle in the upholstery, no smell, no presence. It was as if I had never been there, as if it had all been just a memory, or a foretaste of what was to come. My face turned pale. My hands began to shake. I felt a lump in my throat, and a strange dizziness took over my body. I had to rest my forehead on the steering wheel to keep from fainting, and it was at that moment that I understood. The reality around me no longer followed rules. The streets, the schedules, the voices, everything was out of place, as if something were drawing me into its circle, and I no longer knew what a memory was and what a present was. When I looked up, I saw a silhouette standing in the middle of the street under the flickering light of the street lamp in the distance. Stop, looking at me. The face couldn't be seen, but I knew. It was him, or that was what remained of it. And now I have no idea who's behind the wheel. Have you ever had the feeling that maybe you're not the one living your life anymore? After that night, everything that defined me ceased to exist. I'm not exaggerating. It's not an expression. I was just a rideshare driver trying to pick up the pieces of a life that had already fallen apart before. But at least, in that quiet early morning routine, I could still function. Now, not even that. From the moment I stopped that car in the middle of the street and saw the empty bench as if it had never been there, something inside me crumbled, something important, something I couldn't recover. In the days that followed, I could barely leave the house. I locked my car in the garage and left the app, uninstalled from my phone, as if that would be enough to protect me from what I saw or what saw me. But it was no use. The problem was never the car, neither was the app. The problem was that somehow it left its mark on me. It drew me in, and now it was part of the repeat, even without driving anymore. The first night away from the wheel, I thought I'd have peace, that I'd sleep in silence for the first time in weeks, that I could finally leave the weight of that voice behind. But at 11:17 p.m. sharp, I heard the sound. The back door slammed shut. Exactly the same sound, the same vibration of metal against the hydraulic seal, a dry, precise noise, impossible to mistake. The kind of sound you recognize after years of doing the same thing. The sound that until recently meant a race, a passenger, work. Now it meant something I didn't want to name. I leaped out of bed, heart racing, tripping over my own feet, running to the window like an idiot, because deep down I already knew what I wouldn't find. The car was there, locked, untouched, no doors open, unmarked, not a living soul around. But I swear, with all my sanity, that the sound happened, and it happened again, the next day, and the next, always at the same minute, always with that weight, as if a part of me was being called or reminded. Over the next few days, my mind began to fragment. I lost my appetite. I started avoiding mirrors. I started hearing footsteps when no one was home. My head hurt constantly, as if something was trying to break through the barrier of reason to show me something else. And the worst part? I started missing him. Not his, the man, but his. The pattern, the presence, the certainty that something was wrong, but at least it was something I could chase, touch, confront. Now it was just absence until one day I understood. It wasn't going to stop. It wasn't going to disappear. I could lock the car, turn off my phone, and move to another city. It didn't matter. It would still be working at 11:17 p.m., not out of revenge, not even a curse, but out of habit, out of repetition, as if it had been chosen to be the connecting point, the missing link. And there, between a sip of cold coffee and a phantom notification flashing on my phone, I made the only decision that made sense. I was going to discover the truth, not out of bravery, not out of curiosity, but because it was the only thing I had left. Either I faced it, or I'd spend the rest of my life living on the edge of something that would never go away, something that was already inside me. I began revisiting all the places, the street where I first picked him up, the old building where he always dropped me off, the room where, according to the 2014 article, he was found dead. I spoke to everyone I could, doormen, old taxi drivers, morning watchmen. Most of them remembered nothing, some even laughed. One or two looked at me pityingly, until he met an old janitor who, upon hearing his name, stopped sweeping the hallway and remained silent for an awkward moment. When he spoke again, his voice seemed lower, tired. I shouldn't have entered that floor. It was a closed area of the building, abandoned for years. But he insisted. He said he needed to resolve something with the computer network inside. He never left. Were you able to see the body? I saw it. I saw it. And it wasn't supposed to be like this, no. It didn't make sense. Like this? He looked at me like someone who had already seen. Something he shouldn't have, but accepted it. And he replied, his eyes were open, but he wasn't supposed to look like that. The phrase sent chills down my spine. I didn't ask anything else. There was no need. Because I knew that look. That same look that stared back at me in the rearview mirror. It seemed to pierce my skin, my memory, my will. That look that no longer belonged to anyone in this world, but still existed for some reason I didn't understand. I came home with my head exploding. I spent hours staring at the stained badge I still had with me. Sometimes I swore the name was slowly starting to fade, as if time was finally catching up with it too. And it was that night that the sound changed. At 11:17 p.m., instead of just hearing the door slam, I heard footsteps. 1, 2, 3 coming from the hallway, from the living room to the bedroom, and stopping at my door. They didn't match, they didn't knock, they just stopped. I remained silent. Session, listening to my own. Blood in my ears. He was calling me back, but why? What else do you need me to do, or worse, what has to happen for him to finally stop coming back? I don't know exactly when things stopped being real. Maybe it was that first dawn, maybe it was before, maybe they never were. But after everything, after every night like this, after every knock at 11:17 p.m., after every heavy silence and every glance that crossed my path, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a ghost. This wasn't just a trapped spirit, a lost soul, an entity that chose me at random. No, that was a reflection, a mirror of what I was becoming without realizing it. The replay wasn't his. It was mine. The passenger was only the symptom. I was the illness. The car, the route, the schedule, the ritual, all of it was a living metaphor for my life. The same, automatic, aimless life. I'd been going around in circles for years, pretending I was driving somewhere when in reality, I was just running away from myself. From my guilt, from my daughter's absence, from the life that fell apart at my own hands. I thought I was escaping the pain, but I was simply pushing it to the back burner. And that, like everything denied for too long, began to take shape. A face, a voice. You want an explanation? So listen. Last night I slept on the couch, exhausted, drained of energy. The house is quiet. The air is still. No lights are on except for the one on the microwave. And then I dreamed. But it wasn't a dream. It was more vivid than anything I'd ever felt while awake. I was driving down a completely empty road. The sky was a cracked mirror, and the asphalt felt wet, but there was no sound from the tires. The car radio was playing an old recording. My voice. I said things I'd never heard myself say. Confessions, I'm sorry. Screams muffled by years of silence. And there, back there in the back seat, was he. Only now it wasn't the man in the white shirt. It was me. younger, dissolving, with sunken, dull eyes. The badge hanging from my chest bearing the date 2014. I looked at myself, and the older version, the one speaking to you, understood everything. I was the passenger the whole time. That man who appeared every night was a manifestation of what I had become. Someone trapped in the moment of loss, in trauma, in regret, when my daughter left, when my wife couldn't stand my absence anymore, when I stopped living but kept going, like a car with an empty tank coasting. That badge with the date 2014 on. It wasn't his. It was my anchor. The memory of when everything inside me began to die. The abandoned building. It represented my inner life, closed, full of empty rooms, dark, with a single memory rotting at its center, alone. The passenger asked if it was still Tuesday because in my head, it never was. It was a Tuesday when she left me. It was a Tuesday when I couldn't pick up my daughter from school because I accepted another career path that took me too far. A Tuesday that didn't end. That didn't stop coming back. Little by little, the pieces fell into place. Every night was an opportunity life gave me to pay attention, to really look. But I only saw a strange passenger, never seeing that it was my fault he sat behind me every day, staring at me, following me, waiting for me to stop pretending. And when I finally accepted that, when I stopped running, stopped the car, looked back, and saw the empty seat, it wasn't because he was gone. It was because he never needed to be there physically. I'd carried him inside me this whole time, and now what I needed wasn't a race anymore. It was an ending. So I took the plaque, went to the building where I, had been found dead in that old story, and left the plaque on the ground. I handed it over, not for a spirit, not for a ghost, but for me. There, in front of that rotten and forgotten place, smelling of mold and neglect, I realized that the truth wasn't in the strange races, or the exact timing, or the sound of the door. The truth was in everything I never wanted to see, in the pain that pretends to pass but only hides, in the trauma that disguises itself as routine, in the repetition you call work, but which is really just survival. After that, the sound stopped. At 11:17 the next night, I waited, and nothing. No door, no alert, no knock, only silence. But not the suffocating silence of before. It was a different kind, the kind that hurts, but heals. I think he or I have finally reached our destination. And now when I drive past the car in the garage and see the back seat, empty, clean, without that mark it always left, I almost miss it. Because when you carry a weight for so long, its absence hurts too. But it is a pain that teaches, a pain that liberates. Every now and then I wonder, how many other drivers are out there transporting passengers who don't exist? And what's worse, how many don't even realize it? And you? Are you sure you're driving? Or have you already become a passenger? And once you realize you've become the passenger, there's no going back. The days passed, but not like before, not like normal days, which begin and end without asking for anything. These days came with demands, with longer silences, with reflections staring back at me in the mirror. I stopped driving, yes, but that doesn't mean the journey is over, because even without the car, without the app, without the phone ringing, the path continues here inside, and there are nights when I wake up with my hand clenched, as if I were still holding the steering wheel, sweating, my body leaning forward. It feels like I've suddenly braked to avoid something or someone. There was one occasion, a few weeks later, when I needed to take a carpool as a passenger. It was unavoidable, a doctor's appointment, a delayed train. It was raining. I took a deep breath and called for the car. It arrived quickly. When I got in, I greeted the driver, a young man, maybe in his 20s. The bench still smelling like a store, that smell of plastic, of newness. We barely spoke. He followed the GPS, attentive but distracted by his own thoughts. When we passed an empty intersection, very similar to the one in the first race, he spoke softly, almost by accident. "Man, I don't know if it's just me, but there are days when I feel like I'm with someone who's no longer there." I froze. I felt my back go cold. I looked at him. He looked back in the rearview mirror, just for a second. For that look, it was too familiar. At that moment I understood what no one had ever said out loud. The road has no end. It simply changes hands. I've been there. Now it was him. Tomorrow, maybe someone else. Because there's something about that moment, that exact minute, that opens a gap between the world we see and the one we pretend not to see. And if you're in the right place at the wrong time or the wrong place at the right time, someone gets in your car, someone who shouldn't be. There, someone who needs to be remembered, someone who perhaps was once you. And all of this this repetition, this cursed schedule, this figure that returns every night. It's not about death. It's not about being disturbing. It's about us, about what we bury inside ourselves, about what you ignore, about what it carries. They are our faults, our losses, our sorrows. No one comes out unscathed. And the truth is, most of us drive without knowing who's in the back seat. But sooner or later, we all look in the mirror. And what you will see, well, that depends on what you avoid seeing when you're awake. So I ask you now, without irony, without drama, without filter, are you sure you're in control? Or have you also let yourself go for a long time? If you've made it this far, you've probably already realized that this story isn't just about a strange passenger. It's also about us, about our repetitions, about what we carry without realizing it, and about the signs the world insists on showing us, but which we almost always ignore. Somehow this video took you to a deeper place. It brought back silence, tension, maybe even a memory you'd rather keep hidden. And if it made you think differently, feel differently, then it was worth it. Now there are more people who need to feel this way too. The like helps the story reach others who may also be driving along without knowing who's with them. Checking in keeps you close, because what comes next is even deeper, and it will pull you in tight. The following video is already playing, and I assure you the journey is not over yet, because there are other stories waiting to unfold, other voices that want to be heard, and each one of them carries a new secret, a new scar, a new chill. If this has kept you hooked so far, imagine what awaits you next time. Comment on the word below cycle, so I know you felt it. Now choose the next story and come. The darkness has much more to say.